The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, the sort of place that reminded you of gravity and inevitability. I walked in quietly, letting my eyes drift over the familiar faces. My parents, seated confidently near the front, whispering to each other as if they already owned the outcome. I remembered the day they told me I was no longer welcome, turning 18 like a guillotine on my independence. The phone calls that stopped, the invitations I never received, the small everyday gestures of family warmth that had vanished. Their grins now felt like echoes from another life, one in which I had been powerless, dismissed, and invisible. The judge began reading. My name appeared first in crisp official letters, heir to my grandfather's estate. My parents' smiles barely wavered. They leaned toward each other, whispering about management, strategy, control. I allowed a quiet exhale, a subtle satisfaction that was mine alone. I did not speak, did not gloat. Their expectation of dominance was palpable. Then the judge turned the page. The room seemed to hold its breath. Conditions emerged. The estate could not be managed by my parents, could not be touched without my explicit consent, and any interference would nullify their claims entirely. The authority in the courtroom, the judge's voice, measured and unwavering, enforced the consequences in a single unambiguous stroke. I saw it immediately. My parents' faces changed in microseconds. The confidence cracked, their whispers faltered. A smile that had assumed certainty dissolved into something thinner, taut with shock. The shift was quiet, restrained, but undeniable. They had misjudged, assumed entitlement where none existed. For a moment, I let myself simply observe, without commentary. The power dynamic had flipped silently. No one needed to say a word. The law had spoken, and I was now unmistakably in control. My restraint was its own statement. In the following moments, the room felt heavier with awareness. My parents exchanged glances, realizing their expectations had been shattered. They were still my parents, but they were no longer my gatekeepers, nor arbiters of my worth. That authority had shifted concretely, decisively. I thought of my grandfather, of the quiet lessons in his generosity and fairness. The estate was more than money. It was acknowledgement of my life, my perseverance, my resilience. I felt a measured sense of vindication, not a thrill of revenge, but a quiet reassurance that years of being underestimated did not define me. The rest of the reading continued. Other bequests were noted, minor relatives murmured their thanks or indifference, and I maintained my calm, observing rather than participating. I was not emboldened by malice, but by clarity. The boundaries were drawn, the rules enforced, and I was recognized. Afterward, outside the courtroom, my parents approached. Their words were cautious, clipped, rehearsed. I responded with measured politeness, no anger, no triumph in my tone. The external tension remained. They were aware of their diminished influence, but I did not need to articulate it. The result had spoken for itself. Walking away, I felt a quiet strength settle in. My relationship with them was still complicated, still unresolved in some ways, but the dynamic had shifted. I carried with me not the weight of resentment, but the acknowledgement of my own autonomy, the understanding that vindication need not be loud or cruel. It could simply exist, steady and undeniable. In the days that followed, conversations were awkward, tentative, filled with unspoken acknowledgement of the changed balance. I remained measured, professional, distant when necessary. The estate, now firmly in my control, was a tool of security and recognition, not a weapon. And as I reflected, I realized the lesson was not just about money or parental expectation. It was about endurance, about restraint, about the quiet power of legitimacy backed by authority. My parents' smiles had shattered, but mine remained intact, calm, composed, and entirely my own. I had not sought revenge. I had simply claimed what had always been my right. And in doing so, I discovered the subtle, profound strength of standing unshaken when others assume weakness.